evening, everyone. Welcome to Piqued, a meetup for electronic music makers. I'm your host, Corey Luna, and on AV is Astromech Rich Hogben. Tonight we have got two wonderful guests. We've got Fictional Animal coming to you from Moscow in the morning, and we've got Audio Terrorist from Seattle, Washington. Say hello, everyone.
Hey,
Hello,
everybody.
everyone.
Mazal, thank you very much, and good morning. Uh, uh, Thank you very much for
Thank
waking
you
up.
for having me. That's the best morning I could imagine.
We're very happy to have you. And Caleb, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great.
Excellent. I see you've got some wonderful lights going on in your studio.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
The stage equipment isn't on the road, it's lighting up the space.
A good place for it, too. You got some wonderful pieces in there. I see a lovely theremin I see there. Oh, you got two in there. The Theremin Mini? It's fantastic. Very cool. All right. So, before we take any more of Rosalf's time, because I know you've got a full day ahead of you, sir. Let's start. Let's go into the performances, and after that, we'll go into interview section. So, just to let everyone know what's going to happen, we're going to watch Fictional Animals performance. Then we'll have a brief intermission. Go into Audio Terrorist. After that, we'll go into group interview where we'll take questions from the audience, and I've got some prepared questions as well for our guests tonight. So please chime in with any comments you've got, and we'll make sure to get to them. And Rich, please put on Fictional Animal.
Hi, I'm Rosalf, aka Fictional Animal, and you are watching the logbook of the making of When You Wake Up.
But when you wake up in the morning and you deliberately, and you do, call those same people, talk about those same things, focus in the same ways.
So, I have this track and I have my other tracks. Some of them have DAW versions, and if you like my stuff, you can help to speed up the releasing of it by simply liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm really interested in a cooperation with a good label to bring my tracks to the streaming platforms and wider audience. Now I'm working on my next track, and if you don't want to miss it, click on subscribe button and button with the bell. This was Roself, aka Fictional Animal. Until next time, and have a safe journey.
Fictional Animal, everyone. That was a really wonderful performance, myself. Thank you very much. We were all very impressed with the variety and tranquility of your track, and thank you very much for sharing so much of the
Thank you.
process of your track. We all really enjoyed seeing your descriptions between the tracks, and we really enjoyed seeing the amount of equipment you used within hardware and soft synths as well.
Thank you. I did it especially for this stream, but I'm going to post it maybe tomorrow on my channel.
It's a very special one. Thank you again for contributing.
Thank you.
All right. Caleb, what do you think?
Oh, I loved it. You kidding? It's so relaxing yet energetic at the same time. There are elements of the first piece that remind me of a lot of early 80s tracks, and yet they're set in the context of a later sound and texture, as well as, again, the late 70s, early 80s. A lot of the pieces are informed by that, but sound like they've been then reprocessed with that same concept to a lush, composite pads, and really like your stuff.
Yeah, I had a comment on Instagram. Someone called this track anthemic.
Oh, the
I
last
think,
track?
yes, the anthemic, and the other comment was like, the sound is so transparent, so I can bump into it.
I like that. And the other aspect, the anthemic, it's anthem, but it's not like militaristic anthem, right? It's a very loving anthem about being positive and being connected.
Yeah, sure. It's the only type of anthem that should exist.
Agreed.
Myself, I really enjoyed your use of samples throughout your track with the audio clip of a woman speaking, and also the sample of rain that you explained within your logbook.
Yeah, it was not actually rain. It was a stream, a flood of water. It's like a tiny river, but in spring it becomes bigger and faster and louder.
Yeah, it sounded very convincing. Very good.
Thank you. Yeah,
All
it
right.
sounds so musically.
And
I think,
your use of arpeggiated notes and textures blend in with that arpeggiated nature of a stream with rocks and the water flow, so they sync together very well, which doesn't always happen. Natural sounds and synthetic sounds don't always merge, but you really bring it together.
Yes, and I thought that sounds of nature is the thing that you want to hear when you're on a spaceship. So you like wake up in the morning and you don't want to hear machines or the silence of the space. You want to hear the sounds of the earth.
I like that.
I must agree that that sounds very pleasant if I'm in the vacuum of space.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Very good. Really love it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Rose Alpha. And we'll come back and have some more questions for you after Caleb's set. And so, Rich, let's please go into Audio Terrorist.
My willpower eroded, and that's hard to swallow. You're my enemy, agent. Untitled number 5. Will we survive? Untitled number 5. Our guess rises above this devastated world of sin, and still a bit of hell breaking my will.
Audio terrorist, everyone. Wow, that was amazing.
Just a little bit of chaos.
No, yeah, I'm very impressed. Thank you again for doing this scale up. It's a real treat to see you get back into it again. It's been a while since I think you've had a chance to really compose a track like that.
Yeah, I got to do a little over a year ago. I got to do the singer songwriter part of Audio Terrace. Audio Terrace has two sides: the experimental side, and then when the experimental side goes from that last track all the way into a song, a 3 or 4 minute song form, and it started more like the Artmatic stuff, collections of bits and pieces, or this overall piece today, collections of bits and pieces with tape manipulation was how it began, and evolved eventually to have songs. So it was really nice after it's now been 2 years since I performed at Resident in San Francisco. I give a shout out to when that comes back. Um,
And Frank Martin's listening too.
Yeah, so the Pleasure and Pain Symphony that was performed at Resident and Resonant Frequencies in Oakland, that was the last time that the experimental, truly experimental side of Audio Terrace got air. So I greatly appreciate the invite to do this. And I just challenged myself in 48 hours to produce new material with whatever came at me. It was very, and to just experiment with that and not try to be too singer-songwriter about it.
I think you came at it with the minimalist aspect to writing,
Yes.
and it paid off really well. We could hear everything. There was no really distorted parts. Everything was quite crisp to hear on our end, and it really came together. They had so much going on in there. I can't wait to ask more about what you're doing with everything between hardware and software, and likewise, Ralph, with you as well, because we all want to know more about what you're doing between hardware and software, because you both have very technical sets tonight, which I'm really excited about. It's always really fun to see a variety going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'd say we're yin and yang. I really enjoy and love the really blended together, focused um, way you create your music, and it's such a
Yeah, and
pleasure.
I dig the experimental way that you do your stuff. For me, it was like showcase of uh, soft possibility that I barely can could understand what's going on.
And I definitely intended that this particular piece to be uh, a collection of things. And I know the Peaked audience is interested in gear and software. So this is the first time I've ever actually brought that to the forefront, showing the software, showing,
So you invented the software.
I I run the company that sells the software, and a friend of mine invented it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Eric Wenger, he invented Bryce 3D in the 90s, and then Metasynth, which was one of the products you saw where I was painting the synthesizer sounds. And then the math program he invented in, I don't know, the 2000s, where you put all these mathematical blocks together and the output of the equations is rendered visually and sonically. So it's a bit of a chaos engine. Very
Yeah.
hard to predict with Artmatic what you're going to get. But that's the joy. He very much believes in exploration for exploration's sake,
Mhm.
being surprised.
And Caleb, tell us about how you're using Arcmatic along with Synthmatic for your set tonight?
So actually, I'll start from the beginning. The ring, the MIDI ring. When this came out, I guess a little over a year ago, a friend of mine said, "That looks like something you would own." So that was my Christmas present 2 Christmas ago, and it's fun. And now that there are Bluetooth MIDI adapters, you can just plug in a Bluetooth to any keyboard or whatnot and use the ring as a controller of it over Bluetooth. So that was the first thing, was me using the laptop as a keyboard. Is about 1.5 octave range, and then they have their own software, but I can control, more sophisticated instruments like the Mini AK and the motif over there with it as well. Then the second P section was done in Metasynth. And Metasynth is like 6 programs in one. It's an effects processor program. It's a spectrum analysis. So you can grab all these harmonics. So I took the birds in the beginning, and then I used filter mapping to take the original sound of the birds and start doing these different filters on the bird. And then I used a shuffler to chop up and slice and turn the birds into having an actual beat. So more taking the chaos and putting more structure into that. And then I did a spectrum analysis of the bird sample, and you heard that layered into there. Then the beats are all through a part of Metasynth called the image synth, where you have a synthesizer and a sampler, and then you have a screen, and then you can use the screen to control the synthesizer and sampler, where pitch is bottom to top, time is left to right, brightness is volume, red is left. I always get that wrong, right? I'm used to red being right. Red is left and green is right. So say you have a piece of music and you say, hey, I want to add a stereo pan. Normally you'd have to go into that and do a bunch of panning and an automation envelope. On this, you just literally select a picture with different patterns of red and green, and your entire piece now has panning. So it's like I was filtering back and forth between having the beats panned and not panned just by applying a color filter. If that makes any sense. Because everything that's yellow is in center, and as soon as that pixel becomes green, it's going to move to the right. To the right. And as soon as that becomes more red, it's going to move to the left. So you get instant panning.
Wow.
little trippy. And then again, you can paint on this palette, and behind that, select what synthesizer, or if you want a sampler, a bank of samples playing. So you could do like a whole complete dance track in that one window, and then bounce it out and record it. So that's
So you can paint the track.
Yes, you can paint the track. And so I just had it on loop, and then I was bringing up some presets and then drawing some additional parts. And that particular one had multi-sampler, so they were splits, like on a keyboard split. So you had like a kick drum sample here, etc., up the list. So I knew where to paint.
Mm-hmm. And
That's really
if
amazing.
I don't know where to paint, what will I hear?
Completely depends what instrument you have selected. If you could have an FM synthesizer. It doesn't. I didn't show it in there, but if you clicked on instrument, another window opens up that actually shows the instruments. If it's just an oscillator, a sine wave, or whatever you want. So you could be looping that, and then you can go in there and actually modify the synthesizer. So think of the painting as the control surface, or like the keyboard, and then there's a synthesizer behind that that you can go in and edit.
And where is the timeline?
The timeline is left to right. So I don't know if you could see on the video, but there was a cursor going by left to right and then looping back.
Ah, looping. Okay.
Yeah, and there's another part of the product you didn't see that actually is a more like a sequencer DAW where you could take that one bit that you saw, like the beat patterns. You can take those pictures and then sequence those pictures in the sequencer room. But one of the Audio Tourist album, Entertainment for the Day, the entire album was done in Metasynth, and it's like dance, goth, industrial, rock, the whole gamut. So
Yeah, that's kind of industrial background that you have. That's right.
yes. Audio Tourist started off purely experimental sound collage, and then by the 90s had morphed into integrating a lot of goth industrial in it. Yeah. I'd say it's a mix of a bunch of stuff. The name Audio Tourist, we came up with that name in the 80s to try to describe this, gathering of all sorts of surprising things and putting together.
Cool. Maybe
It,
it's
it was
the
called being. It was called having no money and no gear and just grabbing whatever I could. Old radios, turntables, broken piano, and a pocket recorder, and just collecting all this stuff.
Thank you, Caleb. And let's go over to Rosalf. Rosalf, please tell us a little bit about your setup tonight, how you prepared your set, and what you're using for tonight's set.
So it's not an actual set. It's a compilation of records that I've made uh, for my track. The track called "When You Wake Up," and I tried to reproduce and present to you all the process from the beginning to the end, from completely Dallas jam to the sample-based DAW project.
One of the questions I've got for
So
you, Rosalf, is actually Rich had a question for you. I want to know, are any of the hardware devices controlled by Reason, or are they sampled in?
uh, I use Reason only for sample-based production. I don't use it as a controller, and I don't use it as a source of synthesized sounds. Only samples for drums and samples that I recorded during my sessions.
Oh, very good.
And
yes.
of course, field recordings that I usually do when I go somewhere.
And Rosalf, what do you like most about using Reason for composition layout?
I like um, I like the first. I like the sample manipulator called grain or grains maybe. Uh, so it's cool thing that you upload the sample and you can make an instrument of it. Like you upload the noise sample and you can do a very good ride like in the song there was a right sample sound, and it was made of two samples. The one was the actual right sample, and the second was just noise, like white noise. Yes, and the right uh, it has the mid-range frequencies, very very bright mid-range, and I used the white noise for higher frequencies. And I also like to use the Dr. Rex D-Rex 2 device, because you can upload a loop, let's say a drum loop, and then you can slice all the drums and use only this or that sound, and use them separately, pitch up, pitch down. It's very convenient. And if you if you like to use like Amen breaks, uh, it's very convenient to do in Reason in Tears 2.
And what version are you using of Reason?
It's Reason 10.
And are you planning to use Reason 12?
Actually, not. I like the way it works.
Very good. And tell us a little bit about the hardware you're using. Really enjoyed the layout you had. I love the overview, the bird's eye view you had of all of your synthesizers laid out. I know you mentioned in the log you were using, I think it was the Korg Minilog DX, and there's a couple other wonderful pieces in there. Please tell us about that.
Yeah, the Minilog XD. Uh, it's the first song that I made with this synth. Um, it's for me, it's a new piece of gear, and every time I touch it, I learn something new. Uh, and I started the new track now, and the next step will be actually to add a Minilog XD part. For me, it's a good synth for low mid-range sounds, I would say. And the other piece of gear is a Muslim Fatty. Maybe it's already vintage. I don't know, but it's 100% analog, uh, and I bought it for the purpose of a strong analog bass, which it do very well. And the whole sound of this synth is completely different from any synth that I used before. Yes. The the Cork wave state, uh, maybe you know what is it. It's for me it's a sample player, but with huge possibilities with wave sequencing. So when you uh, actually push keyboard note, you're not hearing one sample, you're hearing the sequence of samples that you invented and designed with this synth. And the samples itself, for me, sounds very cool and different, and mm, that digital character, I like this because of sometimes it uh, destroys the sound really well. And the micro freak, I think it's everyone know what is it. Arturia micro freak. It's a very cheap synth, but I really in love with it, with its possibilities and modulation matrix. I don't think I will change it or replace it with anything.
It's a good synth. It's as Rich has mentioned, it's a good value for the money, and I too admire it. It's
Yes,
very
and
cool.
with the synth agents that came with the last firmware upgrade, it, it's really was like I discovered the synth agent and made the song completely inspired by this synth agent. Then I turned into the uh, next synth agent and I made another song. And the three synth agents give me like three my last tracks. I mean the beginning, the moment of when you look for the first inspiration.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really great.
You've got me thinking about how you said, what was the exact word you said about how it really messes up or messes with the sound, that particular unit. So I'm now looking to see if there's a plugin for the Mirage DSK, because I back in the day that was my favorite sampler because it really crunched things up. What was the box that you were talking about again?
Cork Wave State. Do you mean the big black box with the keyboard?
Oh, I don't know what it looks like, but you were just talking about how it really manipulates the sound in an interesting way that intrigued me.
Yeah, it's Cork Wave.
Okay,
It's like the modern recreation of Cork Wave. There was a famous synth. I just forgot the name. So it's
The Wave
the
Station?
recreation with. Hmm?
Was it the Wave Station?
Yes, the Wave Station. So with the synth, you've got like Wave Station plus 2 more gigabytes of samples and uh, the possibilities of the wave sequencing. It's like when you sequence the samples and each step uh, has its own pitch settings and it can has its own different completely sample, and uh, you can change the timeline of the sample sequence and timeline of the pitch sequence. Uh, so I did not completely um, discover all the possibilities of this scene.
Nice. I've brought it up on screen here, so I'm checking it out.
I'd like to get
I
into a
like.
little bit of history of you guys, since we've discussed a lot about you and the software you both are using tonight. I'd like to know a little bit about how you got into playing electronic music. And Caleb, would you like to take the first shot at this question?
Uh, Simply, it was two key moments in my life that I'll never forget. One was being with friends. It was the summer. We were hanging out. He had a cool pool, and the summer songs were playing on the radio. And all of a sudden, I heard this whoa, 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 whoa. And I thought, what the heck is that? And it's the guitar foot pedal that's used at the beginning of Gary Newman's Cars. And then that synth kicks in and the drums kick in, just like a ton of bricks hitting you. And I was like, what is that? I want that. And then the other one was I saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and the guy walked up to the keyboard and touched the keys, and lights happened as well as music. I'm like, what's that? I want that. That was the beginning of it all.
Yeah, those are great references. Now, Ralph, how did you get into playing electronic music?
It was like um, the first year in the university, and I just got Fruity Loops, the the first DAW that I used, and it completely blown my mind, and I had to to visit the first year of the university for the second time in the end of the things because of Fruity Loops.
That makes a lot of sense. I remember when Fruity Loops was and that was a lot of fun. I know a few people on here as well. I believe Dylan Sang is also a fan and has used Fruity Loops in the past as well. No, definitely a great intro to writing your own techno in a early on soft synth.
I'm sitting here laughing because I'm like, you kids, you don't know what it was like back in the day when we had to use a razor blade.
It's true. I don't.
I just looked up that. What was that first sampler I ever had access to at university? The Emu Emulator 2. The thing was like, you could, like smash your way through a window with it. It's like a brick, big metal device. And I still think it was the most honest piece of gear I've ever seen, because when you started it up, the little LED screen read out, "This will take a little while."
I remember at this 2 years ago. I was at in March. I was at Synthplex in Burbank, California for that convention, and I was at a panel for Thomas Dolby, and he was talking about when he was back in the 80s when he was playing, and he would be in all the different types of electronic equipment he was using between synthesizers and computers, and very similar to what you mentioned, Caleb, is that when he was going from song to song, it would take a few seconds for everything to load. So he said that he got good at doing interludes between songs where he would probably like either talk to the audience or play a riff or something like that while the computer or the sampler loaded those tracks.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and he goes way back. He goes into the 70s, working on Foreigner albums, and that gear. That's luckily I never had to deal with that early analog gear because they talk about not only are you trying to load things, but they're going out of tune. Like
Yes.
every 2 minutes, you were having to retune every pot, and I'm like, wow, that's intense. I never had to play these. The emulator 2 is done. Depeche Mode used them live in the late 80s, but I mainly all that stuff I did with studio equipment. And quite early on, I would record everything to tape and perform against tape. I wasn't about to lug around, you know, 400 gears of keyboard, 400 pounds of keyboard.
Yes.
Though
Yeah.
I did during the 90s, I had two 4 foot, 3 to 4 foot studio racks of gear that would go to shows.
Wow.
And that was just to play samples and to have some synths. And then using later backing tracks with ADAT. So you could have 8 tracks of backing and a couple samplers. And that was like, uh,
That's all you
by,
get.
yeah, but by 2004, it was like laptop.
Yes.
So
And
a huge, huge shift and change during that decade.
yeah, this technology's become extremely, extremely vast and smaller.
Yeah, I want to ask you guys about that. Uh, how do you know when to stop adding plugins?
Zelf, please ask. What do you think? How do you when do you decide to stop using plugins when you think you've used enough?
I usually use very basic plugins like delay, reverb, compression, and a little thing in Reason that called audio retro transformer. Uh, so if you want to add some specialness like correct speaker or like reduced MP3 quality or vinyl wipe with that artifacts. That's the only thing that I use that uh, some way uh, mutate the sound and all the other I prefer mm, to use the very good source that you don't have to add plugins. This is the best way for me. So that's why I've gone to the hardware scenes because software scenes for me all of them sounds like uh, simplified versions. I don't mean the interface. It's it can be a very uh, very massive interface with a lot of features, but with a very simplified sound. Maybe I don't did not use the latest VSTs, but on in this point, uh, I will I prefer to have another piece of hardware.
Mm. You make a great point. I've never had this gear crash. Right. So there's still a place for hardware. Ableton Live hasn't crashed on me, but every other program I've ever used has crashed or given me a headache to get things done. And it seems like if you can sit down with one piece of gear and just work with that piece of hardware, you're in a stable environment at least.
I want to share something real quick with you both on this topic of when to when you know when you're good with the amount of soft synths you're using compared and hardware.
Ownership or in the mix. Like too many soft synths to pick from or too many soft synths applied to the track.
Well, here's a great example. I'm gonna try to show this on my webcam here, see if it shows up at all. Let's see here. You guys see that at all? It's a little out of focus because it's kind of hard to see. So this is Chord Gadget. This is something that I compose on my cell phone, and throughout it, you're seeing. Let's see here. Oh, let's see here. Okay, here we go. All these different tracks. I've got 33 different tracks, different synthesizers, you could say, and about 26 of them are samples. There are samplers I'm using for different audio samples to create, uh, to sample them in, use some reverb on them, delays, and then cut them down to the point where they become beats, or snares. Basically they become percussion part of the song. And this was an experiment I did a couple of years ago with that app particularly, where I wanted to create a song solely based on samples. So I chose my source and cut them in, and ended up using 26 different samples to create a song, mostly with a couple of other, of course, synths, like some like mono synths, and at least maybe one drum machine or two to maintain the beat. And that was a fun project. But usually, I don't usually do that all the time. Using Chord Gadget is fun, but I'm not always doing. I don't compose on that all the time. I've done quite a bit on there, especially over the past 40 years, uh, just from having a previous surgery where I couldn't lift much after for almost a year, so I had to figure out how can I write music without really moving my hardware too much, and I started getting more into what you can compose on your iPhone. And compared to what I usually do in hardware versus synthesizer soft synths is I primarily try to go with hardware synths, with especially with the Euroracks. I love playing with those. And when I go into my DAW, I'm using can't remember the name of it right now. Um, anyway, but within the DAW, I'll use maybe one soft synth just as added texture to that track, and it's something that I choose to limit my palette on what I'm doing. For another example, like with Eurorack, since you can just go kind of go kind of crazy with the amount of variety out there, with all the different types of modules and different types of companies out there, I try to limit myself, especially because the cases themselves are very expensive. So I try to limit my palette a lot on what I'm going to use musically, and be very selective about what I'm going to use. So, say one of my favorite skiffs is 84 HP, so it's maybe maybe about wide. So I try to limit myself to only use that, and then maybe use one soft synth once in the DAW as well to bring in some elements. So it's just one of those approaches, and I think with a lot of us, it comes with experience and getting to know ourselves about what we like to compose and what we feel comfortable with composing.
And creating your own sound out of that. The the bottom line is right now we have an incredible amount of tools available. And what I see you doing, Corey, is you're going to that whole supermarket of sound and selecting this piece and this piece because it interests you. And when you put it together, it makes a distinctly you set of music. It's like
That's right.
it's not because I've met some folks who are kind of the infinite plug-in shoppers, whose music I could say could be made by anybody, or you know what I mean. It's not like they're always crafting the sound from a producer standpoint. Like, hey, what's the next sound? How can I produce something more? Versus the artists, and this is my music that reflects me. And you strike me as someone who is an artist who has created a collection of tools to make your sound. I think all three of us fit in that category.
I think so too.
Yeah, it's all about expressing yourself, uh, uh, but kind of a final point, because in the beginning you like you don't know what you're doing, uh, and a guy sent me a message on Instagram with a screenshot, uh, and he says he uses like 100 tracks per project. And I just text him, keep experimenting, dude, because you I did not said it in the message, but it's obvious that he completely does not know what's he doing.
Yeah, it sounds like he's
Just
still trying to find out what he wants to do with it.
yeah.
Yes, and in the end point, you just uh, you find the piece of gear that allows you to express yourself perfectly. And for Corey, it can be a little Eurorec box, and for me, it can be uh, something like mm, something like what I have now. I mean, no, for me, I imagine it's like a band when you have a bassist and you have a uh, uh, maybe it's better to imagine in a frequency range. So you have the bass frequencies, the low mid range, the high mid range, and the highs. So for me, it's like a band when each instrument um, uh, just feels the frequency range.
That's a good point. Composition is composition, no matter what tools you're using, right? If you're like, I love kicks and I love bass, and I'm gonna just slap them all on top of each other, probably not the best strategy, right? Everything needs its space.
Yeah.
I think so too. And
I was gonna,
that's a great point. And I think yeah, we all agree. Because I think we all kind of come with that aspect of that of a band idea of what's controlling what, right? What's controlling bass, treble, and percussion, all, and then what else do you want to add to it, or what do you want to subtract to it from it? and I think we all have a similar idea of how we think about composition when we want to create a song.
Yeah, the subtracting part, because I came at this starting with not really much access to anything. I early on built the habit of adding more as I got more available, and that was the big lesson that I had to learn is subtraction. So for your this guy that you met who has 100 and some tracks and however many plugins on that composition. I mean, if it's working, it's working. But that I would joke and tease him. There's a new plugin come out. It's called Eraser. What does it do? It removes stuff. It's like artificial intelligence. It comes in and removes EQs and removes parts.
That would be fun. That's a good one.
I'm going to patent it right now. I'm going to call it the Uncomposer.
Very nice. Speaking of
Someone give me royalty rights and it's yours.
subtractive compose, whatever it says. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And speaking of composing, I'm curious to know about who are your musical influences and who inspires music to write. Zelf, who in, who are your musical influences? What do you like to listen to?
Um, this point, I listen a lot of ambient.
Ambient.
Yes, it's mostly ambient. Then a bit. No. Then a lot of dub techno, and then a bit of IDM, but not glitchy, more melodic IDM. And speaking of the names, I can I don't really listen to one album or one track twice, but if I want to remember something, it will be like crazy instrumental acoustic hip hop group that called Athletic Progression. That is artist that I've listened like 5 times one album. And the most of the songs come more like a stream from Bandcamp and SoundCloud.
Cool. And where are you using SoundCloud mostly for discovering and listening to music, or are there other places you like to go?
Um, yes, I think there are uh, three main sources, and the first one is the SoundCloud. The second is Bandcamp, but Bandcamp not a source. It's more like a collection of pages in my browser. And the third is French radio named FIP. Yeah, guys, I recommend it to you. It's I think the best radio that I've discovered, and there is a nice app with different streams like rock, funk, pop, electronic, reggae. Yeah, but it's it's good when you not don't want to dive deep into the music.
Well, thank you. And Caleb, tell us about some of your musical influences and that you like to listen to, and those that have inspired you.
But not necessarily influence the music I make, or
Yeah, yeah. What music influences the music that you make?
I, the reason I was thinking about it, I'm like, musically, what inspired me early on, ABBA really struck me as smart because they, the two guys, Benny Bjorn and the gals too, they were going out and grabbing all this different stuff and then putting it together in unique new ways. Uh, and I hadn't heard that before. All the music before that I had heard was, finely constructed pop songs. But if you listen to ABBA, it's quite eclectic, and you realize what they're doing is they're a production team who's searching for a market to break out and make money. So one moment they're doing like Spanish music, one moment they're doing Hawaiian music, one on, and so I like groups like that. David Bowie is probably the hugest influence on me. But if you know David Bowie, you'll know that he's one of the biggest thieves in rock history. In that his stuff he's borrowing from everybody, and if he has an idea about something, he hires someone to do that, right? So people might say, "Oh, I love David Bowie's Low album," which I do. Well, that's Brian Eno. Oh, okay, great. So anybody who's eclectic, that from one track doesn't sound like the next track, I'm all for it. And then I'd say philosophically, what drives my music is more from the art school of things versus the pop. So John Cage, um, I have I would say a Duchamp influence. And any of your listeners who don't know who Duchamp is, go look up toilet and urinal and Duchamp.
You're talking about Marcel Duchamp.
Yeah, yeah. To you just rip a urinal off the wall, put your signature on it, put it in the art gallery. There you go.
I was always a fond. I'm very fond of his piece "Bride of the Bachelors."
Ooh, I do not know that one. Do send
Oh,
it my way.
if you look up "Bride of the Bachelors" by Marcel Duchamp, it's a wonderful sculpture piece where it's basically describe. You could describe it as it's a pane of glass, and you've got kind of I think it's a wireframe bride, and then you've got blotches, which are the bachelors. It's a very neat piece. Very very good stuff. Yeah, Marcel
Audio
Duchamp.
Terrace,
What's that?
definitely. I think Audio Terrace, even the poppy stuff, if you listen to it, like multiple tracks back to back, like on the last big album, it, it's more informed from like Duchamp, right? These components, this very postmodern collection of things being synthesized in a unique way and then placed back out there.
And Caleb, you have a very wide range that you have recorded and performed over the years. I've heard and if any of you are interested, we would Rich, could you please post the band camps for Audio Terrorist on Bandcamp, and also uh, Fictional Animal, please. If you guys take a look at what Caleb's got under Bandcamp, it's very impressive the amount of work you have available on there. I know you don't have everything on there, but there's quite a lot of variety on there. And I think you have your kind of more country bluegrass in a separate area than what you have for Audio Terrorist. Audio Terrorist is more rock industrial with other influences going on from in like the goth area. And with that, in that area of just Bandcamp on that page, I see that you've got stuff going from, I think, up to 2019, going back into the 90s, and I think your earliest piece is from maybe from 1984. And
Yeah, 84 was the first compilation.
right, and then, and of course I was listening to a few things to remember some of the things I was listening to when you and I first met a couple of years ago, and a few of those tracks still stand out. Um, there was like "Sexy Bitch" and I think "Pleasure and Pain."
Mhm.
Those were fun tracks.
It's funny you picked the two. Those are the most downloaded, most sold, played tracks in all of the years.
Wow.
Uh, and you said those two tracks. I thought that was
Now you
fun.
mentioned that David Bowie was he was able to hear something that he liked and have someone write or collaborate with someone to create his sound for that influence. Do you see yourself doing anything like that, or just maybe like influenced at all?
No, I mean I've certainly listened to a lot of material. I consumed a lot of music up until a couple years ago, and I seem to have lost interest in mass consuming it. But up till then, I listed morning, noon, and night everything, anything from you know uh, banging trash cans to opera to rock and pop, and it was just constantly playing. And I would discover stuff and go, "Hey, oh, that kind of reminds me of something I would do." But it was not like I listened to like Throbbing Gristle and I decided I'm going to do loop-based electronic uh, material. Um, I do recall certainly some Beatles tracks were a big influence on me. I recall flipping over a B side, and it was George Harrison's "The Inner Light," and there was this very nasal, strident Indian music. To which my father yelled from the other room, "What the is that?" Right? And I thought, this has something. Right? What is this? What is this? So I certainly have explored a lot of unusual music along the way. Yet most of the time, I listen to songs, not pop, but artsy pop. And the Bowie reference there is he would have an idea of what he wanted to make, and then he would find the people to make it with. So, and I find that's very much more the way an artist approaches things than, say, a musician does.
In a lot of ways, David Bowie very much was an artist, even outside of music. He was constantly painting and performing as an actor in various productions.
And the artmatic stuff that I collaged tonight, I saw is like, okay, you're no longer you're not here at Peak listening to a concert. You're not Peaked the art gallery, and you're seeing these projections, say, on a wall, and they're just there. They're not there to have a beginning, middle, and end to entertain you and make you fall in love in 20 ways, but they are just a thing in of themselves. And again, I think that comes from more of the art headspace than the um, music headspace. In music, I find people they want to assault or they want to soothe, right? So it's still a compositional beginning, middle, end experience, like a little mini soundtrack. Um, but I find in the arts that's not required, right? David Bowie might have fit into a genre for a moment, but it was like, okay, what piece do I want to do for my next art gallery show? As opposed to what song do I want to write? I just think they're two different processes. So I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah, influences from a
Just,
bunch of directions.
I enjoyed how you responded. I think I really enjoy that idea, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
And one thing I want to say about the art versus pop thing, which I've been doing some interviews with people, and the guests seem to think I have a hang up about the art versus pop thing. They don't see the difference. I think with pop, you do want to entertain, like your intention is different, and with art, you just explore, and it's almost like what comes out as a result of that exploration is almost a byproduct rather than a product.
Well said. And that actually reminds me of a writer. I can't remember the name of his. I can't remember his name right now, but and that's something that I really enjoy about Peaked is that, it's not, it is entertaining. However, it's not entertaining in that mainstream sense because the people that I asked to come to Peaked are creating music that make you think. It's not, it's a great critical piece because there's a variety of artists that I've asked to play, and everyone has their own style. Some people do things in a particular way, but not everyone is in the same way. There's different approaches, and that's something that I really enjoy about the variety of artists that I've gotten to know and feature on here, is that every artist has their own perspective, and there's different ways to enjoy audio, not even music itself, but just audio. And kind of going back to your artist name, Audio Terrorist, that there's these wonderful things that are happening, and it's not something that you're going to hear everywhere. You know, Peaked is very much curated. I'm as if it was a gallery, because I want these artists to be featured and to have a voice.
Thank you for doing that. And for I'm spacing on your name. I tend to forget names. Our dear guest from
Roself,
Russia. One more time.
Roself,
Lizelle. And Lizelle, the thing I love about your piece is, and I hope you don't take this in a negative way, it is commercial. I love pop too. I love art and crazy, strange art, but I love pop. When I say pop, I don't mean, I don't suppose like, the top 10 pop songs, but artist creative, what I'd call happy music. And you make that. And during one of the tests before today's show, you said that your music doesn't really have a place in Russia, and it has shocked me because it took me about 4 measures of you playing your first song, and I thought his music is so digestible, it is so enjoyable, it is so like there is no reason why this music can't be everywhere. So it blows my mind that my introduction to you talking about your music originally was almost like, oh, there's no market. I'm glad to be on Peaked because there's no market in Russia. And I'm thinking, it's so marketable. Like, Audio Terrorist, I think is some of the popular songs more marketable, but most of it's not like mainstream marketable music. But the stuff you're doing is, and I just wanted to reflect that back to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's quite important for me that it's kind of positive vibe because I feel kind of responsibility as an artist because you guys were talking about music and sound, and I think the main characteristic of music that it turns you into a certain emotional state, and everybody listen to music with that purpose to feel that kind of emotion. So there is nothing bad if you listen to pop music and dive into those emotions or rap music uh, when you like a teenager. But when you more mature, I think you you will look for more peaceful stuff, and that that's what I do because I'm also becoming older, and as I said, I mostly listen to ambient, but I'd like to my music to have a groove, and the drums for me is a mm, absolutely essential thing. Uh, and speaking of the market, we have like two electronic labels here. One in Moscow with named Hyperboloid, and they are releasing uh, more like cold digital dark stuff. And the second in the St. Petersburg, it's named Abstraction, and that's all about future garage stuff, like vibes like uh, this. And I don't feel like I'm sweet on one of these two communities. And maybe I don't know any other, but I should know. I live here. So maybe
I think England is your music. I think would be more folks that I, I've been exposed to a lot of English pop, and certainly have a deep love of electronic new wave, OMD, early Human League, all that stuff. I just think that stuff I've heard out of England sounds more like your stuff. So maybe the Russian market isn't the market. I don't know, and maybe it's older older folks who like 80s music, and so maybe it's, even though to me it's more mainstream, uh, maybe it's not what currently is the sound. But I there's a commercial quality to what you're doing. It's well mixed, it's well produced. Like you said, it feels good. I could see it applied commercially as well as, um, I was carving pop songs out of your tracks as you were playing them. Like, okay, yeah, that's where the lyric would come in, and here's where a singer would work. So I just think the material could be used in a number of ways. And um, you
so.
mentioned, yeah, go ahead.
I will be grateful if you just send me your thoughts about what 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 labels can uh, release the stuff like this. Oh, my battery is low, 15%.
We should wrap up pretty quick actually because it's 9 o'clock over here, and the result, I'm sure you've got a full day ahead of you, and we don't want to eat up the rest of your battery.
And I'll
Yeah,
just jump in one last thing to say, you have my email on the group emails. Send me an email, and yeah, let's chat.
cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Excellent.
And about producing, the last thing I wanted to say is I was speaking about the drums, and why I don't go completely dowelless is that I can't produce the proper drums on any piece of hardware. Yeah, so if there will be a hardware like, oh, maybe it's a polyend tracker. Maybe you can produce that, but I don't know the quality of their plugins.
Hmm. Oh,
Did you guys use a polyend tracker?
I don't. Caleb, do you?
No.
Rich has. He knows about it. So contact Rich. He'll Roself. He'll probably be able to help you out with a little bit. He
Uh,
also says it's a good
sorry.
sampler.
Uh,
My Rich, who's behind the scenes right now that you spoke to earlier, um, says if you like trackers, email him later on, and he'll be able to help you out with that.
yeah, cool.
Yeah. Well, Caleb and Roselle, I want to thank you both very much. Pasiba for playing Peak tonight. It was and this morning. It was a real pleasure to have you both on here. Caleb, you and I have known each other a couple of years now. It's always fun to talk to you, and I miss seeing you. It's always wonderful to catch up with you, and we always have so much to talk about in terms of music.
Ditto. And I got my second vaccine several weeks ago. My wife's got her second vaccine yesterday. So in a couple more weeks, we're going to be able to travel more.
Looking
So
forward to
at
seeing
some
you
point,
guys.
I will be in San Francisco, and we will find the time.
Looking forward to that time. Roselle, thank you so much again for playing Pete again.
Yeah, thank you. It was such a pleasure to get your invitation and to talk with you guys today. For me, it's like uh, I'm belong to something because I kind of feel the lack of it here.
Well, what we do in what my experience Roselle in the electronic music community since I've gotten back into it is that it's been a very supportive community, especially in the area that I'm in here in the Bay Area. Everybody supports each other and tries to help each other out, in small ways. So, of course, none of us are, making, great amounts of money on our music, but we try to help each other out by sharing each other's music, trying to help promote each other on social media. And, and if someone puts out an album, digital or physical, we all try to pitch in and buy a copy, however that works out. And I hope and I expect that uh, some of the community will probably start following you on social media and reach out to you maybe here and there, and hopefully we'll be able to see more of your music reach a broader audience now that we've gotten now that the United States knows about Fictional Animal.
Yeah, that's great. That's a turning point for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. And there's a couple of so Peaked comes out of some other great um, musical groups, get-togethers, and live performances that happened here in the Bay Area. We've got Resident, which happens on the second Tuesday of every month, run by Frank Martin, a few other wonderful people. That still goes on virtually, and Resolve. I'll be happy to introduce you to Frank Martin so that you can maybe sign up to do a set for Resident sometime. I think that might be a possibility. And also, Resident Frequencies is another wonderful uh, live show that happens in the Bay Area. It used to be monthly, now it's quarterly since it's all virtual now, and that's a really great combination of audio and video artists. Like, I can't not stress how wonderful it is to have video artists. I know Bill Otrosky was on here a little bit ago when we first started this evening. He goes by Dirty Bill, and he makes wonderful, wonderful video pieces. We've also got Fetz, who's another wonderful video artist as well, and audio artist. And there's some other great things going on beyond the Bay Area within podcasts. There's what we've got a fellow up in Seattle does Podger Modcast. That's Tim Held. He's got a great podcast, and where he interviews the artists and usually does like a patch challenge or something like that with the artist. Something real fun like that. And then there's also Data Cult Audio, who's been running for about 4 years now, out of Arizona, and he does a really great thing where it's just pure music. There's no talking. All he does is he'll request maybe like 30 to 25 minutes of music from an artist, and he just puts it out there into the world. And his podcast has a variety of amazing music, going from ambient to noise. It's a real roller coaster to listen, if you just go through it. And he's on SoundCloud as well, as besides podcasts. So you can actually go to SoundCloud, go to Data Cult Audio, and find a lot of variety of artists from around the world. And there's another one, I think he's out of Minneapolis. It's Art Music Technology by Darwin Gross. He does his podcast. I don't know if he puts it anywhere else, but that's a really wonderful podcast he's been doing for many years. And he interviews not just uh, audio artists, but also visual artists as well. And he does a variety of talented people on his podcast. Really fun, wonderful stuff. So again, everyone, thanks again for tuning in and checking out peak number 22 with fictional artist and audio terrorist. And this is Corey Luna and Rich Hogben saying, stay home and stay safe. Good night.
Bye.
Oh.